Welcome to TERRA's third Thursday video podcast for the month of February 2025. Today, we will be having another strategic discussion designed to help your organization maximize your e-scrap and ITAD operations. I am your co-host, Stephen Napoli, president of TERRA, the Electronics Reuse and Recycling Alliance. For our regular consumers of these sessions, you know that we strive to be brief while providing you with useful information to enhance your knowledge, operations, and your bottom line. As a reminder, all of our previous content is available at our website, jointerra.org. But quickly before we get started, we would like to acknowledge our new and renewing members since our last session. These include Relectro, SEAM, Secure Asset Management, Fourth Bin, and ESCO Processing and Recycling. Joining us as new certified members this month are Cyclic Materials and Expire. Today, I am very pleased to welcome for the second time our friend Joe Mount, Head of Business Development for ZipErase, to discuss the three things you need to know about data erasure. Well, all right,
Hey,
let's get started. We are very pleased to have Joe Mount, our friend with ZipErase, who's now conducting and co-hosting with me now his second TERRA Third Thursday. So I'm going to allow him to introduce himself and then tell us a little bit about ZipErase.
thanks, Stephen. I'm Joe Mount. I'm head of sales at ZipErase. ZipErase is a data erasure software solutions company. And so we help our clients not only erase data, but also process equipment with our solutions.
Well, very good. So today we've got you here. Brought us a subject that's very important, very critical to people in the ITAD business, data erasure. And we're going to be talking about some best practices and especially three things you need to know. So tell us those three things.
Yeah, you bet. So thanks, Stephen. So wanted to kind of have a little kind of session where I can sit down and talk about three things that we're seeing kind of impact sort of the segment. It's not unique to data erasure, but our ITADs, our customers, some of the stuff you might already know, but I think this would be great for folks. So let me just go to our first slide here and talk about that. So the first topic is really that I want you to know is we have a new standard out there of erasure. Now, in 2014, which was about many years ago, I guess that's 11 years ago, the NIST 888 came out. And that did wonders because that took us from a 3-pass overwrite DoD to almost a single pass. And right now, sort of like NIST 888, that little erasure standard is what we hear most in the industry.
And this
And
is the
that's
requirement
fantastic.
that e-stewards certified folks have to have, correct?
That's correct. That's correct. There are that's pretty much the most prominent standard. You will encounter certain customers that have unique standards, and it's what the end customer ultimately wants. But that's what the government specifies. But really, what's happened in between that 2014 when this came out till now, NIST really never came out with a second version. So we had this huge gap in technology, and the IEEE organizations decided to fill that gap, and they created sort of a revision. It's for lack of a better term of the NIST. It's called the IEEE 2883. It says also -2022, which is just the year it came out. It came out in August 2022. So it started really providing necessary specification to securely sanitize, newer drives, newer technologies within drives that NIST just didn't have. At the time when this came out, it wasn't a big thing. And so it's easier to use. It's clear language and instruction with respect to how you clear a device, how you actually purge it, or if it just needs to be destroyed.
Yeah, that makes
So
sense. I mean, the technology has changed so much from, spinning plates to, now NVMe and some of these other, high technology, storage devices. Um, the environment has changed quite a bit in the last 11 years.
you're right, Steve. And really, it's like, what do I do in this situation? NIST just doesn't cover it very well. So IEEE does. So I kind of wanted to bring that to the front. And I kind of wanted to emphasize we have a new standard. What does that mean? Is that something I need to pay attention to? So let me take you to this next slide and talk about that and spend a little time. So why should you care? So if you're still using the NIST 800, it's still valid. It's not really a problem. But we're seeing trends where a large OEM has come out and said, okay, we're going to talk to our customers, our end customers, like the corporate customers, and they're talking about they're adopting IEEE 2883 standard. It's just more modern. It's the way to go. Their security people have looked at it and said, this is the right thing. Let's go ahead and make the change. Further, of course, any large OEM has partners out there, and they're telling their partners, and by partners, I mean like ITAD partners, processing partners. They're asking those folks to say, hey, you might be using this now, and that's fine, but in a couple of years, you need to be absolutely switching over. So we're seeing trends like that. Anytime you have players in the market doing that, that's going to filter down. So a lot of folks are aware of the standard and probably understand it, but you're going to start seeing it more and more in the marketplace.
So to the processor, excuse me,
Go ahead.
I'm an ITAD and I currently have a bay where I plug in my NVMe drives and they're being erased according to NIST. Do I need to buy new hardware or, kind of what's the end result for me in terms of how my processes might change?
Right. It's really a simple process. Right now, there's a selection in your software, and I'm speaking for all data erasure softwares. Most everybody that I know has the 2883. There's just a selection. Instead of selecting NIST, you might be selecting an IEEE 2883 version. And usually in your process, you probably have a setting to make that permanent. So every time you run the program with your operators, it'll come up and automatically run that selection. So it's as simple as that. There's selections of erasure methods. And if you're data erasure, you don't really get a new one very often. So this is kind of a big deal and that this comes out. And but it's needed because it also solves a lot of questions by customers. How do I do the following thing? And I feel like this document really does it.
Yeah, so this is already built into kind of my operations. I just need to kind of change my processes. Not even change my processes, just kind of change the way I'm talking about it and how I switch things over. This is a great way for people, for potential ITADs to, have a point of conversation with their customers and be able to tell them what's coming down the pipeline, what they should be expecting, and what they're doing to get ahead of the curve.
Exactly. So I think this will be being smart in this area and being knowledgeable and talking to your customer about it, and probably be very advantageous. Let me kind of give you a couple more benefits, and these are subtle benefits. Like NIST is here, and IEEE takes you a little bit farther, but because you have more specificity about how to handle, you can do a wider range of devices now, where NIST did not cover what to do with them. Because there's new technological capabilities, you can actually, and I'm going to use the example because the IEEE can tell you, hey, you can go ahead and use a purge, which is more secure by doing a firmware erasure in certain situations. You're going to be able to actually, if you did 1,000 drives, more will be able to be done in a more secure fashion. So in our world of erasing, if you can do a firmware command or a cryptographic type of erasure, or those in combination, that's going to be more secure than writing zeros to the drive each time because you're working on a lower level. The benefit there is that also, if you can do more on the firmware, that is a faster process. So if you did 10,000 drives or 100,000 drives a year and you're using IEEE, a certain percentage more are going to be done firmware or faster. So it'll be incrementally better. I don't have data to say how great that would be, but the more often you can do a higher security, faster erasure, the better off your process is going to be. So there's some operational benefits, but they're modest. But it's just going the right direction.
Excellent.
All right. So good. So Steve, you now you know what this cluster of letters and numbers mean now.
Yeah, there's so many
It still
acronyms and
feels,
numbers in this industry.
to me, it still feels new. It doesn't roll off my tongue like the NIST 800-88R1. That just like is there. So even in the industry, it's understanding what's under the hood with this document, what it actually does, understanding from talking to engineers and processing. But I think you summed it up. The good news is, hey, it's really not difficult to implement. Chances are your existing software provider already has it, and it's just changing your standardized process and flipping a configuration and your software, and you are there. Well, let's keep going. Let's go
Yeah.
for the second thing. So, what I think is really, and I've been in the industry too long to date myself, but I want to talk a little bit about device locks for PCs and Macs. And when I use the term device lock, I'm using the term like how mobile device management, or corporations might have all their assets and they might link them to a system so they can keep track of them. And that system may make life easier for them to catalog and keep up with what software on them and putting software on them, or it might help them with keeping track of it in case it's stolen. I'm going to
Yeah,
talk
that and
about
all,
both
and all managed
examples.
service providers are going to do that service as well.
Right, that's right. So, really, I think of the people that led the way in this space was really in the Apple way. So, and I think we can all identify as individuals, we kind of associate our devices to our iCloud device group. And then that way they were kind of locked from a personal, like Find My Phone, or if you lose it, someone else couldn't really use it because it was assigned to you. That same process happens on the corporate level. But what we saw, our Apple leading with that security, we're kind of seeing Microsoft, jump into that space too. And they might have always been in that space, but it's going to become more, I'm using the word prevalent, but they're going to be able to simplify that and pass that down to small businesses, not just the large enterprise, because their tools are getting better and better. So one particular lock that I want to make the team here aware of is it's a Microsoft Autopilot. They have this package, and I won't go into detail, but Intune, which helps you manage devices, and Autopilot, you can enroll devices in your company as an enterprise company into Autopilot. And very simply, once they're enrolled, you can automatically load the software from your company on it. It's associated with your company. So Microsoft knows that that belongs to your company, ABC Enterprises. And it just overall for the IT side, it reduces a lot of IT touches, deploy software, manual load, press buttons, that thing can all be automated. So brilliant, right? So that's good for the corporation. I guess it's good for Microsoft. And there's other, and that's one example of a device lock on a PC because there's an association, it's an enrollment. Well, they also have enrollments, and I'll use another one. It's from CompuTrace, which I think comes from Absolute Software. And CompuTrace is less about IT automation and more about locating stolen computers. They sell something that kind of sits on the computer, and if your laptop gets stolen and somehow it gets on the internet in some fashion, it'll send something back and kind of alert the whole process that it's now stolen and can be recovered.
Virtual
Kind of reminds me of
AirTag.
an AirTag. It's an
Yeah.
AirTag, right? So excellent. Those are great, and everybody probably is aware that something like that's out there. But I think the challenge that we're seeing in the ITAD space that you really want to pay attention to is more and more of these devices from these corporations are going to arrive to you on your dock, and they're already going to be locked. I'm using the word locked. I'm going to say they're enrolled because enrollment's different than maybe a lock. So an enrollment means you can process that device, you can erase it, you can collect information, you probably can offline load a Windows on it, but when you ship that system downstream or sell it to their next person in the chain and they try to use it, well, it's going to come up and do just like we talked about that AirTag. It's going to say, hey, I see this laptop and it belongs to corporation ABC because ABC did not release it from their system. So, and now I think that caused a lot of problems. What I know from ITADs, they have a reputation of shipping good material that works. When we say works, we mean like it's functional, it's tested, it's good.
Yeah.
But when you can't, when another
When you
person
can't
can't
use
use it,
it, that
that's another return. So the detection of enrollment is going to be a big challenge for industry. I think it's growing. We're going to see that with the CompuTrace. We're going to see that with this, the Microsoft Autopilot, sometimes called Intune. Those type of enrollments are going to be kind of invisible in the processing until they get to another stage. So
it's going to
maybe
make
lots
repair and reuse so much more difficult. And we talked a little bit about this offline, which was, you know, so many of our members still, do, collection events in their communities. They work with, small business that, if people, if taking their personal devices, locking it up, the ability to unlock these devices en masse or from material that's coming in from various different sources that you don't know who's managing it is going to create a lot of potential more e-waste because they're not going to be able to, provide a truly functional device.
absolutely. So, kind of it's an extra admin task for, the IT asset disposal company because they're going to have to spend some amount of time detecting this.
How do
And
they
if it's,
detect it?
um, so manually you can go through the process by simply taking a computer and booting it up and attempting to install Windows on it, a Windows operating system. And when it goes to process, and this might take 10 to 15 minutes, it will actually kind of let you know that it's enrolled. Um, Software providers like me will help augment that. Will capture that information. We might put it somewhere in a cloud, and then later, if you want to check to see if it's enrolled again, you just press a button or something, and we can tell you if it's still enrolled or not. But really, you're provided now as I'm using you, Stephen, as the ITAD guy.
Mm.
You've got this list of serial numbers that show enrollment, and you could probably associate them with that company ABC that you got them from. Then you have to call them back up and say, hey, I need you to unenroll these. And they're going to do their magic on with Microsoft somewhere as an admin and take them off the enrollment and they get back to you. So there's a little bit of back and forth. So I can see, I would even think contractually, if you were working with somebody saying, I'm going to take your assets and they need to be unenrolled. If not, then there's going to be a fee to do additional work because otherwise
Right.
you will have to destroy that, and it's a loss. I think that's a very good point. And we talked earlier today about how your iPhone could be personally locked. If you sold that to somebody on eBay and didn't disassociate with your account, it still couldn't be really used by somebody else.
Yeah,
The
even if
beauty of
even if the hard drive was swapped, even if the data points in there, because the hardware itself could be, the chips inside are going to be associated with that particular person.
That's right. There's going to be little device information that's outside just the storage device. Because if that was as simple as just swapping the hard drive, then that the theft
Yeah,
problem would be rampant, right? That's the first thing you would do. So they've gotten pretty smart on both sides, and it helps solve one problem that kind of messes with another.
yeah, protects
So
me as Stephen Napoli, but does not protect me as your ITAT partner.
yeah, so and I know there's some folks watching this are experiencing that, and it is a challenge. It is a challenge. I often get the question, are we able to unenroll people? And the answer is no. The tech to keep this enrolled and kind of a device lock in that perspective is very strong. We can to do detection, which is kind of helpful to a point, but there's still can save some time, but there's still going to be some work there. But as the world puts more and more security, and security is a good thing, it's also educating that as we get to a more secure world, we're going to have to come up with some processes to handle this, so it doesn't become a total big problem here.
Right. I'm thinking, obviously we don't to TERRA, process any materials ourselves, but I do receive a lot of emails and things for people selling equipment. And I think about, third-party resellers of equipment. If you're buying a third-party resold equipment, how are you ever going to know the original owner of that device to be able to get some of these unlocks? It's going to make, some of the bid sites and some of the, where you're getting material that you don't know exactly where the original source was, a real shot in the dark.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. That's a surprise where someone's really left with a bad device, or worse, the ITAD has spent the money to process it, build the customer, passed it down, and now it gets returned. So that's expensive. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I think that in detection of the enrollment is going to be a big thing. So that's my big number two there. So I know we're cruising along, and I mean we can only make this so exciting, but we're going to go on for number three. And
A little bit of a drum roll.
well, I am going to date myself again. 10 or 15 years ago when we talked about doing a factory reset on a phone, the question was, is a factory reset acceptable? And the answer a long time ago was no, because when you reset, say, a phone, like an Android phone, you did not know what you were getting. You did not know who wrote the reset. Did the reset erase the hard drive, or just erase pieces of information, or just reset the operating system? You just didn't know. So it was taboo. That was like, you couldn't use that word. And that's kind of interesting. But we slowly are, getting reset has kind of snuck back in as being okay. I still think people avoid using the word reset. We call it different things now, but it's essentially the same thing. And I kind of want to use the analogy pointing back to Apple as Apple does a pretty good job of, when they have an iPhone, they do an Apple sort of clearing. They erase the contents from the MacBook, or they do the same thing from your iPhone. So even when a company like us goes certified data erasure, when we do, say, a phone, we're using the Apple methodology. We're not like trying to get around Apple. We treat Apple's method for erasure from their factory, or how they've done it, their engineers, as the standard. We're just enacting that and verifying that it's done, and collecting that process information plus the information on the phone. But what we're finding out is that's an acceptable method, because there's really not another way we can go talk to the storage device on that particular device.
Is like that Apple can like develop their kind of erasure protocols based on a standard like NIST, or kind of where the birth of that was from?
That's correct. So they are not they are probably, but if you read, and I'll speak on MacBook, you can go inside your MacBook or iOS, and there's an erase content, all contents and settings in there, and that will get rid of everything. And that's kind of very interesting. But to your point there, they are doing a NIST 800 sort of cryptographic erasure. It only lasts about 4 minutes. They are probably just changing the encryption. So all the data gets encrypted. And once you change the encryption key, the information is no longer, it still looks hexadecimal, but you can't put it back into what it is, because the key has been erased. It creates a new key, a new, I guess, 128-bit.
I was told there would be no math.
Oh, I'm sorry. There'll be a test on this later, Stephen. I had to say that because it's been recited to me for so long by an engineer that I just picked it up and used it like I knew what.
You start bringing hexadecimals into the equation, then I'm gone.
And I probably don't. I probably don't know. I think we've all watched like Interstellar and found out what the hexadecimal was used, but still don't understand it. Yeah, I kind of lost my talk there, but you made me laugh a bit. Anyway, so that is what's happening. So anyway, it's a NIST, to answer your question. It is not their unique way of world of doing it. They follow, but they know the reason we trust for the iPhone and MacBook to Apple is they know where all the data is to do the security process. An outside person wouldn't know where they put all sort of the sector's information and their commitment for security for their users. So they've kind of led the way there. So I'm kind of going like, is factory reset acceptable? And I'm kind of going, I think it is. I think it really is. what you may not, I don't know if you knew this as we talked about that, but within the operating system of Windows, if you type in under the search bar, like reset this PC, there is an option where you can reset your PC by removing everything, and it'll reinstall a sort of Windows from a partition it has. And there's also another element to do that, but do a partial erasure, but still keep your apps. So is this a NIST, standardized process? I don't know, but we use Microsoft and we use them to trust to erase at least our personal information or consumer personal information, and it's very powerful. The one other one is when you think about a Chromebook, the only way you can kind of clean up a Chromebook is you do something called a power wash. And that is a term and a process that works through the Google Chromebook. And that's really the only way you can get to it and do it. And that becomes an acceptable method of erasing that device as well. So what we used to call factory reset, bad word, I just see the trends going that as devices come out, security heightens around the world, around these devices, they're coming out with solutions to erase themselves that are built in. And depending on, and I think most of these corporations know that the consumer is now caring too, so they're trying to do a better job of doing those erasures. So I just kind of, I think someone could argue with me, and that's why I brought this number three. I think some people would debate this and put out comments like, there's no way I'd use such and such. And they're like, yeah, maybe you wouldn't, but it's becoming more accepted than it was, say, 10 years ago. So I could see this ebb and flowing. And that's the good news, because I think as iPads are going to receive devices like, watches or new Internet of Things, how do you erase those? And if we don't have participation from these OEMs that produce them, it's just going to be trash, quite frankly.
Right.
So,
But even when you do this, like a factory reset, it's probably not going to take down, those locks that are on that either. I mean, so that still remains an issue.
right. Those locks are associated with next time it gets on the internet, it sees the computer, not data, but it sees the computer configuration information, or it's kind of like serial number, the MAC address, right. Those type of things that show up that are unique to the hardware. That's true. Those locks are going to be, those enrollments, I'm going to train myself to say, are going to be a challenge.
Well, I'm eager to try this out. I've got a PC that's like a monitor television that's got an old SATA, stick drive in there that has an old copy of my computer from 3 years ago, and I use it occasionally because it's on my television. But it kind of annoys me. It's full of junk. I don't need a duplicate of what I had 3 years ago, so I'm going to try that reset this PC on, see if I can get delete all that stuff and refresh it. That could be interesting.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So before we let you go here, so these are the kind of the three things that people today need to be looking at, understanding what's out in the marketplace. But where do you see the future going? What are going to be the hot button issues as technology evolves in the next few years?
Well, I have a crystal ball, and it's told me everything. So I can only tell you so much, Steve. I can only tell you so much, because I don't, the fifth dimension's out there. Well, to be quite candid, I mean, we're just kind of seeing within sort of the data erasure world, we're seeing just more and more security awareness, more and more tools. But I think if you look on the broader picture, that if we go 10 years out, just think how many people know about security on any level and their information. That continues to expand. So I think that's right. Good for when people have confidence that their information can be properly disposed of, they're more likely to do what with it? Turn it in for reuse. So, and a lot of that leadership is done at the corporate level. So corporations that do it, those people that work there know that can be processed that way, then they'll do it personally. So my hope is and believe that data security is going to be, there's going to be more confidence in the processes to do it safely. People will actually recycle more equipment. I'm a guy that still holds on to old hard drives. I know that's weird, I will get rid of the computer, but I'll hang on to the hard drive because I may at some point look at it and keep my information there. And that's a
Right.
little bit of paranoia, but I think if we
You're in the
can,
business. I know that's the funniest thing. The people in the business, like I pointed out, I still have my own iPhone 4. I use it as a prop a lot of times when I'm going to like television, interviews and that sort of thing. But part of it's because I didn't want to get rid of it.
well, if we can develop the confidence that's strong, then more people will just recycle that equipment. We'll have more reuse. That may not be good for people that make new equipment, but that'll be less waste. And that's a little bit part of kind of the goodness is that if corporations didn't believe in reuse, they would just destroy it all, and we would
Right.
create a lot of problems. So that's where I see things going. I see increased security. I think enrollment is going to be a given, but I hope there'll be tools out there to make it easier to unenroll for the purposes of refurbishment and ITAD, reuse. So that's my hope. We'll figure that out. But you know, I don't know. We could be invaded next year. I don't know what the crystal ball tells us. I can't tell you that.
And you just see, things like mobility, like the watches and the rings and all the new kind of tech coming out. You see that growing as well.
Yeah, what happens and how can they do that? But I've actually seen, I have family members that have watches and charging device, the way to charge or communicate with it, and they would lose those cables or dongles or connections. And I was like, oh my gosh, now you go get another one back from the manufacturer, and they're expensive, but actually they could buy it, very readily available on Amazon or replacement things. So it seems like you can actually connect up and talk to these devices in a very common way. So I'd like to think that it wouldn't be expensive to talk to them, and but they would have to have some of those built-in protocols so that it's not an afterthought. I think a decade ago it was an afterthought once you made a device what to do with the data on it. I feel like it's a little bit more progressive now.
Agreed. Well, very good, Joe. Well, again, thank you for, being a great co-host. Actually, more the host than me.
Well, yeah.
Providing us some really good data and information on this subject. Where can people see you next, or are you going to shows that you're going to, or how they get in touch with you?
Well, you can always find us at ziprace.com, and we will definitely be at the ITAD Summit in July in Las Vegas. So we'll be doing that show. We'll be bringing in our UK guys and our Asia Pacific guys. So we'll be there as one big happy family. Probably attending a couple other shows here and there, but those haven't been firmed up. But if you want to reach out, just have a question or want to contest anything I said, I welcome it all. And certainly, from the data erasure community, most of all your providers out there probably have similar can certainly support you. But it was a pleasure being here with you today, Stephen, and I hope somebody got one tidbit or something of value of what we provided today. But want to thank you for the opportunity to be here.
All right. Well, thank you, Joe. And everybody, we will see you again next month. Third Thursday is March the 20th. So hang on tight, and we will see you in a few weeks. So take care, everybody.